The ideas expressed in the following presentations are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of ACI or its committees. ACI web sessions are recorded at ACI Conventions or other concrete industry events and will be made available for viewing free of charge for 1 week. Thereafter, they will be archived on the ACI website or added to ACI's online CEU program, depending on their content. You can earn continuing education credits through ACI's online CEU program. Visit www.concrete.org to register. ACI Conventions provide an opportunity for networking and for keeping up to date with the latest in concrete technology and practices.
Our last presenter this afternoon is David Van Akker, and he's going to talk about hydrodemolition.
Thanks, David. All right. So moving right along with things here, you heard us the term mentioned earlier about water blasting. Hydrodemolition is anything but water blasting, and we'll show you why. This presentation basically follows pretty much the outline that's in the RAP document, so hopefully I'll touch up on all the major areas. You know, what is hydrodemolition? It's basically the use of high-pressure water for not only the removal of concrete, but also preparation of the substrate, preparation of the reinforcing steel that's embedded in it. And most significantly, it's a non-impact method, so that's where you would differentiate hydrodemolition from, say, use of jackhammers. And when you use it, there's a couple examples right there where you can use it for partial depth removals of concrete, and you can certainly use it when you've got complete full thickness removals of concrete. And what you also see delineated in these photographs is you can use it in very narrowly defined areas. Again, it's very useful in situations where vibrations are a problem, where you might have issues with, say, jackhammers reverberating through a structure. And the technology has changed and evolved an awful lot for applications of hydrodemolition. What you saw in an earlier slide was a more traditional method of a bridge deck, horizontal application. Here you see customized equipment for doing overhead removals, for doing removals on barrier walls, for doing removals in tunnel applications and around columns. So the equipment is quite diverse. Considerations for using hydrodemolition, obviously the first major one is water. You're going to have water involved in the operation, so you've got to be able to contain it. The structure has to be able to tolerate that. You probably wouldn't use it in a deck situation where you had occupied space below it. And certainly you also need to have access to the water, and you need to be able to confine it and clean that up. But more significant considerations that don't necessarily come to mind, but anytime you get into a removal operation, you really need to understand what you may do to the structure, like in a situation with the example on the left-hand side, that photo there. You're uncovering a significant amount of reinforcing steel, and you should assess ahead of time whether or not shoring is needed, because you're going to do a significant amount of removal of the concrete in that situation. The cleanup of hydrodemolition, like anything, the technology for that has evolved as well. There's rapid methods out there to clean up the things. You see the use of a large vacuum suction equipment on the left-hand side. The most significant thing to realize with the cleanup operation is you create a cementitious sludge and slurry. And you really don't want that to be left in place to harden on the deck substrate. It's going to be just as difficult to get that slurry off the deck 2 or 3 days later if you leave it in place there. So, the operations, once you do the removal operation of the overall hydrodemolition, you're going to follow that up fairly quickly and get the debris off the deck. You'll see, so there's vacuum operations involved with that, and then there's some other methods where this is more appropriate use of a hand wand. You see on the right-hand side there where they're just cleaning that slurry material off the deck substrate so it doesn't dry on there. That center photo gives you a pretty good idea of a major benefit of hydrodemolition. The reinforcing that's left in place is very clean, and it's very well prepared for the subsequent application, whether you're going to put bonding materials on there or whatever your repair placement is going to be. And hydrodemolition, whereas this photo shows you a vacuum operation as part of a cleanup operation, what you also see is that hydrodemolition is used in situations where all you want to do is profile the top of the deck. This would be an example where you're going to overlay a deck surface. So you're not really removing concrete to a sufficient level where you're exposing all the reinforcing steel. So it's very applicable to that. But in this specific instance, what you're seeing is portable or equipment that's used to actually vacuum the deck. You recall earlier when Peter was doing his presentation the importance of you want a saturated surface dry deck substrate that you're going to apply either bonding materials or your repair material to. You don't want a soaked substrate. So it's very important to get all the materials off, including the water. The waste disposal operation, it just needs to be handled and planned for appropriately. It's not uncommon where you basically use a large containment structures. This is it's a series of baffles used in a tank, and in this situation, the sludge would flow through gravity through a pipe into the tanks, and you're basically just through letting it settle out. You want to separate the solids and the liquids. This is a diagram of how that process can work. The one thing I want to emphasize is permitting of the discharge materials varies greatly through different jurisdictions. There's a lot of places where the water is just ultimately allowed to run back into the ground and be absorbed into the ground, but that's not necessarily true in all cases. The one thing you do want to do is you do want to check the pH of the water before you ultimately release it, and typically you'll just adjust the pH either with CO2 or mixing it with acid. And as with the removal technologies becoming far more sophisticated, this is actually a truck-mounted waste disposal unit where they completely separate the sludge and the liquid. There's apparently a diatomaceous material that's included inside the tank, so it's basically precipitates out all the solids in the sludge, and you're left with a very dry cake material comes out and a water which is extremely clear. Safety precautions with hydrodemolition, as with any demolition operations, you've got to protect not only the workers who are performing the operations, but also be very aware of trying to confine it within either a building structure enclosure, confining it to the areas if you've got adjacent roadway surfaces where you see screen applications used here to just, it's not uncommon that a certain amount of debris, stones and rocks do get thrown off, outside of the immediate shields of the equipment. Again, precautions should be carefully planned when you get into the use of hydrodemolition. You see the slide on the lower right-hand side. It's not unusual that when you start out anticipating you're going to do a partial depth removal, you wind up with a full depth removal. So not only is shoring in place in a case like this, and this is actually, we anticipated completely going through the deck in situations. So you need to anticipate these sorts of things as part of your overall safety precaution program. And that's it. If you have any questions? Yes?
Our biggest issue with hydro, we like a lot, has been the overlay is placed. Even over long term, we get cracked. You're accumulated and your strength is cracking. And we follow procedures to test the parent slab as well as significant efforts to cure properly, and yet we still end up with cracking. That's rather substantial at times. I don't know, what are your recommendations for selecting the replacement material?
But that's more of a replacement material situation. I think you're going to get cracking. It seems, in my experience, you get cracking no matter what, because you've got restraint. You've got you're casting it on top of a substrate, and you do your best to break it up into small zones. So you install a lot of control joints, saw cut construction joints. We do that. but we also allow to come back and fill the cracks that inevitably are going to happen anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you.